Hello out there. We're on the air. Welcome back, everybody. Happy Hump Day. This is live. For those wondering, for those asking the question, about to ask the question, is this live? Yes, it is. A couple different reasons for it. So I talked about yesterday on the show that I was going to do a full show talking about Superback and the new service that we provide here. So that's going to be about half the show today. I also want to watch the video from Michael Saylor from the Bitcoin, whatever yesterday was, the Institute Day. I don't know. I've been seeing it all over the place. I haven't watched the video myself, so I figured instead of just watching it myself, we might as well watch it together, discuss it. And then we'll spend about 10, 15 minutes after that talking about Superback. So if you've already watched the Saylor part, you can skip ahead or you can come back in half an hour. But I decided to do it kind of like a surprise show today instead of, I wouldn't say burning a morning, but a lot of people who show up every morning, they've kind of heard about Superback. They're pretty familiar with it already. So I didn't really want to waste a morning on that. So I figured we might as well just talk about it here. So I had a couple things that were changed in my schedule today, and I had about an hour here. So I figured, why not? Why not? It's Hump Day, as Letha says. Happy Hump Day, Letha. For those who are in Living the Future, you've already been listening to me for about an hour and a bit today, so you might not be as interested in this one. But for those who aren't, this will be your show for today. So let's kick things off here. I actually want to start with this post that I found on Noster. It's going to be the theme for the show today here. And let's just go through it. I'll bring it up. I was going to read it, but we might as well just bring it up on the screen. And this is from a Noster user named Dark. I like that. Good name, good profile pic. Anyways, here's the post. It says, my employer came to me and asked me if I could square him away on Bitcoin stuff. He was pretty blown away that I already had Bitcoin educational website built that I linked him to and a full curriculum developed for teaching people about Bitcoin acquisition, custody, transaction, and security. In 5 minutes, I gave him enough material to easily keep him going for a couple of weeks while he waits for his first signing device and key storage hardware to show up. I'm stressing the need to really understand the asset and the need to stay current on best practices for the technical side of self-custody. It's not for everybody, especially for people conditioned to using custodians for all their investing and finance. So many people can't even manage their passwords without relying on 2FA means of regularly recovering them. That is accurate. I hope he knows what he's in for. Becoming his own bank, manager, teller, head of IT, and head of security. I shudder to think, I hope he doesn't drug himself by taking this responsibility lightly. That's the key there. I hope he doesn't rug himself by taking this responsibility lightly. In a few weeks, I'll test his knowledge and whether or not he's taking things seriously or not by offering to punch his seed phrase for 100K sats per set. Maybe make him number 3 on a 2 of 3 just because I care. So the point is that everybody watching this today, including myself, we've been in Bitcoin for a while. We're fairly familiar with it. We're not experts, obviously. We do not claim to be experts, but we put in the time, we put in the work. We understand for the most part that this is a very serious thing. When you're dealing with the greatest discovery in human history, when you're dealing with the best, you have to secure it with the best. You can't be shortcutting anywhere along the way here. I had somebody emailing me yesterday. They sent me some, they're setting up a cold card right now, and they sent me some options for SD cards. And they were like $8 on Amazon, SD card to put in the cold card, make the transaction. And I said, you're probably fine. I haven't heard of too many things within SD cards, issues in Bitcoin. But I said, if it were me, I would probably go with SanDisk. That's the brand that I'm familiar with. That seems to be the Bitcoin standard of SD cards. So I would pay a little bit more, whether it's $8 or $30. I'm always going to go for the best in Bitcoin. because it is the best asset. And when you're dealing with the best, you have to secure it with the best possible means. So no shortcuts here. Every step along the way, you need to be taking the most caution and using the best products and services that are at your disposal. So that's what we're going to be talking about, because this is a very big responsibility that we're taking on. I think most of us know that, understand that, but I think we're still guilty some ways, somewhere along the way, of kind of shortcutting that and just taking this whole thing for granted. I did anyways. So we're going to start with Saylor here. As mentioned, we'll watch, it's about 30 minutes. I might shortcut it a bit because I don't have an abundance of time here. But anyways, hey, Jay, sorry, I missed your, whatever this thing is here, little squish face. Johnny's here. And we are a little bit later today. Usually we go at 9 a.m. Eastern time, but it is noon Eastern time right now. So if you're over in the Zap stream, say hello. And we're going to watch the Michael Saylor talk from yesterday, Bitcoin for America keynote. It sounded like he talked about a couple of very important issues within Bitcoin and topics within Bitcoin. So I figured we might as well just watch it together. So let's put this on 1.25. We don't need to rush things too much. But here we go. We'll start with this. And if you're just joining us, we're going to start with Saylor for about 20 minutes. And then I'm going to do a full deep dive on our security and inheritance protocol that involves Superback, which to me is the Bitcoin standard of Bitcoin security. So that's kind of what the theme is today. So here we go.
The word strategic Bitcoin reserve to the casual observer they sound like a stockpile of an asset. To a closer observer, it sounds like a stockpile of the most valuable asset the human race has ever invented. But I'm here today to show you how the strategic Bitcoin reserve represents a strategy for United States digital supremacy in the 21st century. The president, with his vision, has established a strategic Bitcoin reserve as of last week and has declared that America will be the Bitcoin superpower. That is prescient. I would hazard to guess that the great majority of the people that saw that post don't even know what Bitcoin superpower means, and they haven't really considered it. I was inspired by the words, and that caused me to put together this presentation today. Why is Bitcoin critical to the prosperity of the United States in the 21st century? That is the question we all should be asking. There are many metaphors for thinking about a strategic reserve of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital capital. If we thought of it as Bitcoin as digital capital, is this a stockpile of cheese? Is this a stockpile of oil, natural gas, or even uranium, all of which would be interesting? Well, at its worst case, in its narrowest form, you could think about the strategic Bitcoin reserve as a stockpile of the apex asset of the human race. And so what's it worth? Well, over the next 20 years, I think it's worth anywhere from $3 trillion to $106 trillion to the United States. U.S. corporations, like my corporation, are actually recapitalizing on Bitcoin. We've gone from having $250 million of assets 48 months ago to having nearly $45 billion of assets in 48 months. If you look out over the next 20 years, corporations that are accumulating Bitcoin on their reserve, like MSTR, like Mara, like Riot, they're going to have $20 to $40 trillion. So this is a small metaphor, but it's a powerful metaphor. But you know, it's hard to rent out or finance or develop your cheese or your gold or your natural gas buried in a vault. So a more powerful metaphor is Bitcoin is digital property. If you own 5% of Manhattan and your family owned it for 100 years and someone said, how are you going to pay your bills? You wouldn't say, we're just going to sell it. You would say, we're going to rent it. We're going to develop it. We're going to put a building on top of it, a business on top of it, or we're going to finance it. We're going to borrow against it. The same is true with Bitcoin. In 20 years, the United States could be generating $10 trillion per year by renting, developing, or financing the assets in that strategic Bitcoin reserve. The AIs are coming. The AIs don't get bank accounts. They don't get credit cards. The AIs, the artificial intelligence economy, will be built on digital capital, digital property. It'll be a $100 trillion economy. It'll be built on Bitcoin. Well, a lot of people, they think of it as an asset. You think of it as a property, but what we know to be true is that Bitcoin is actually a network, and it's not just any network. It's not an information network. It's an energy network. It's a conservative network. I can send $1 billion from me to you. I lose it. You have it. That is the conservation of energy in cyberspace. So when you start to visualize Bitcoin as a digital energy network, what you realize is that trillions of dollars of digital commerce will flow over that network. The banking system of the world is going to rebuild itself on a digital energy network. We're going to have 40,000 banks that'll be settling with each other in real time. Finally, moving billions, tens of billions, or hundreds of billions of dollars an hour over a pure digital network. Right. So if you look at the world and imagine digital energy moving around the world, and then you ask the question, would you want to own it or would you want to ignore it? It's an important question. And of course, you know, I think some of you might have seen the cyber blackout of X yesterday and all the cyber attacks. The last and most important metaphor is when we have open digital energy flowing, it is a commerce network. But when we reverse that digital energy into a shield, it becomes a defense system. Bitcoin's a digital defense system. Bitcoin messages, data authentications, transactions, they're unstoppable, uncorruptible, immutable, immune to tampering by any known cyber threat. You can protect the United States commercial and military and financial systems behind a wall of digital energy. And that's exactly how we will do it. You know, even Elon Musk pointed out, the AIs don't know how to hack Bitcoin. They can spoof you out of your money. They can convince you that there's someone they're not. There's no way to trick an 800 exahash digital wall that's based on modern encryption. The AIs won't get through that wall. What's driving the growth of Bitcoin? It is the most powerful force in the world right now. It's growing nearly 60%. It's become the 8th largest asset in the world. It's about to become the largest asset in the world in the next 48 months. What is it? It's all of the smart money in the world running from risk, running from the past toward the future, from something less secure to something more secure. And they're doing it in the most visible way with their capital. This is a map of the wealth distribution in the world, about $900 trillion. If you break it into uses, half of it is just a store of value. We're long-term, we're preserving our capital for the long term. We just want to keep our money. The other half are assets held for utility. I want to do something with the asset. If you drill into the 450 trillion, you realize the problem is that long-term capital is being dissipated and decimated by fires, by floods, by famines, by tariffs, by wars, by competition, by rust, by obsolescence, by torts, by traffic, you name it, right? What's that cost? That costs 10 trillion a year. There's people go, well, what is Bitcoin's use case? The use case is to not suffer $10 trillion a year of damage from entropy, from inflation, from chaos, from the future. Bitcoin's an asset without the financial risk of a currency, a bond, a stock, and it doesn't have the physical risk of real estate and property. And we're stripping away the counterparty risk to everything. And so we're moving away from risk. And what that means is that as the word spreads that there's an opportunity to keep your money without taking risk, long-term capital is being merged into the Bitcoin network. The greatest digital transformation of the 21st century, it isn't the transformation of music. It isn't the transformation of your photos, your communications, your Facebook friends, or educational videos, although each of those things made $1 trillion company. The greatest digital transformation is the transformation of capital. So it's the transformation of 450 trillion. What's it worth? It's worth half of everything. It's half of everything. That's the transformation. Digital capital is stronger, faster, and smarter capital. It's everything you don't like about the building stripped away, and you've got an invisible, indestructible, immortal, teleportable building. It's a better building. It's global capital. It's everybody that's living in Asia and Africa and South America would move to the U.S. if they could. They'd move their money to the U.S. if they could. They want the currency of the U.S. They want the property of the U.S. They want the security of the U.S. They want the values of the U.S. But they can't have it. So the second best thing they can have is move their money into the Bitcoin network, which has all of the values, protections, and security of the U.S. Bitcoin is immortal capital. Right? You can keep your money for 1,000 years. A 10 basis point fee works out to a useful lifetime of 1,000 years. All the other long-term capital assets have a life of 10 to 100 years. Find a business you want to invest in that'll be around for 500 years. Find a building that will last for 500 years. Find a bond that will pay off in 500 years. Find a piece of art that'll still be legible in 500 years. And finally, what we all know in this room is that Bitcoin is, and digital capital is ethical capital. It's the only thing in this world you can truly own. If you have possession of the keys, if you have possession of the knowledge of where the keys might be, you own the thing. No one can take the thing away from you. Everything else you have in this world, you own at the pleasure of someone more powerful than you until they decide to take it away from you. Satoshi gave us property rights, sound money, sovereign money. It's a network, but what is it? It's the world's most powerful network. 800 exahash. What's the measure of digital power? It's exahash. 20 gigawatts, all the electricity, all the power that fires up the US Navy. It's also got the most economic power. My company spent $33 billion to buy 2.4% of the network. Do the math in your head, you'll realize there's $1 trillion of real money that has flowed into this network, and there's $1 trillion of smart money behind it. It's the world's most global, fault-tolerant, unstoppable network. Each of those ASIC chips is hundreds of thousands of laptop computers. You'd need trillions and trillions of computers to dent this network. And then, of course, many people say, oh, I get it. It's a network effect. It must be a network. Yeah. Well, it's not a McAfee network. That's just enough information about networks to hurt yourself. It's not getting more powerful with the square of the number of nodes. It's getting more powerful based upon the amount of mass, energy, and capital flowing in the network. It's a Newtonian network, like the solar system. When the white dwarf comes past your planet, it's going to suck the atmosphere off your planet. A white dwarf is not the same as an asteroid the same size. They're different. Bitcoin is the brightest thing in the financial universe, right? Heat and light. It's the most interesting. It's growing stronger. It's growing hotter. It's growing denser as it draws the capital of the world into its orbit. What capital? Physical capital. People are selling their buildings. Financial capital. They're going to trade out their low-grade bonds, their currencies in third world and in the second world. Foreign capital. They're going to sell their Siberian real warehouses and their Russian natural gas rights. It's drawing antiquated capital, the capital of the 20th century. It's drawing smart capital. Anybody that thought about it, thought, do I want to be invested in something that's going to decay or be destroyed over time by 100 uncertain risks, or do I want to just keep my money in cyberspace? And then digital capital, right? The AIs, they don't get the bank account. As the economy digitizes, people want to move digital money at the speed of light with a million transactions a second. You're not doing it with a Siberian warehouse. You're not doing it with natural gas or gold. You're not going to do it with any 20th century asset. Where is it headed? Well, there's an open source model. You can download it on GitHub called Bitcoin 24. Plug in your own assumptions. Our assumptions? Well, Bitcoin's currently 22 basis points of the global economy. That's $2 trillion. Over 20 years, right now it's been growing about 60% a year. If it decelerates from 60% a year to 20% a year, the average return is going to be 29% a year over the 20 years. That is the base case. That arrives at a price of $13 million of Bitcoin in USD terms, or $280 trillion in the network. Does the world turn upside down? No. What happens? Well, everything pretty much stays the same, except for those that embrace Bitcoin get rich and powerful. Those that don't embrace Bitcoin get weaker and poorer. Otherwise, everything that you see in the world today will still be there in the world in 20 years. Bitcoin is not a threat to the dollar. The dollar is currency. Bitcoin is capital. In the modern world, there are plenty of academic economists. They will just recite ad infinitum. Well, money is a store of value, a medium of exchange, a unit of account. There, I told you. And they just haven't really thought about that past just rote memory. This is why you shouldn't rote memorize stuff in education. Think a little bit harder about what's going on here. If you need money for the next 4 weeks in Argentina, then you're using the peso. If you need money for the next 4 years in Argentina, you're using the dollar. If you need money for the next 40 years in Argentina and you're smart, you're using the Bitcoin. And so the dollar is competing, but is competing against the M2 money supply of the CNY, Chinese currency, European currency, Japanese currency. Right now, we're about 17% of that. We should be able to grow to 30% of that. How? With digital currency. If US banks and US corporations can issue digital currencies backed by the US Treasury, we will expand that supply of US currency by $10 trillion, right? That's a digital asset strategy. That's why the stablecoin bill and the currency. If US banks and US corporations can issue digital currencies backed by the US Treasury, we will expand that supply of US currency by $10 trillion, right? That's a digital asset strategy. That's why the stablecoin bill and the Genius Act matter. It is not capital. Bitcoin is less than 1% of the capital of the world. What does it compete with? Not the dollar. Bitcoin competes with property, equity, and bonds. Property, equity, and bonds. And what is it? It's 1%. And what is it going to? I just showed you the shocker $13 million Bitcoin forecast. That gets us to 13% of the capital in 2045. We have two strategies. expand our currency to dominate the world with the digital currency of choice, expand our capital to dominate the world with the digital capital of choice. Why should the US want to be the Bitcoin superpower? You cannot remain a sovereign nation if you lose control of your airspace, outer space, or cyberspace. This is a truism. It's pretty important. We're not talking about making a little bit of money here. We're talking about defending the American way of life. A superpower has to keep the air routes open. You must be able to fly, not just fly from here to London. You need to be able to fly from New York to Chicago. If you look at what happened in the first Gulf War, we took control of Iraqi airspace. Within a week, their entire country was non-functioning. Some people would say within 48 hours, they were non-functioning. This country won't function for 48 hours after we lose control of our airspace. How do we protect it? We have Air Force bases. We have military aircraft. This is evolving. It will continue to evolve. Drones, very sophisticated defense systems. We have to keep open our sea lanes. This is a truism for 1,000 years. The Carthaginians knew it. That's why the Romans destroyed them. The Carthaginians had destroyed the Venetian fleet. Every single port in the Mediterranean that was a Venetian port was also a Roman port, was also a Carthaginian port, was also a Phoenician port. Why? Because you must keep the sea lanes open if you would be a superpower. If I cut off your sea lanes, I choke your economy. The Japanese determined this or found this out in World War II. Sea power requires naval bases operating appropriate ships. A superpower has to keep its cyber channels open. What does that mean? It means your communication channels for digital information, but it also means your communication channels for digital energy. I need to be able to move a signal, but I need to move a $10 billion chunk of money. I don't just need to keep the cyber channels open around the world. It's not just I want to move that information or that energy between New York and Tokyo. If I lose control of cyberspace over the United States, I can't move information between New York and Chicago, right? You lose cyberspace, you'll lose your own digital economy. What would you do if your enemy got control of your cyberspace? You saw just, again, yesterday, you can't even log into X. Well, what happens when you can't log into your bank account? Cyber power requires Bitcoin miners operating ASICs, throwing up a wall of digital energy. And you want to hope that more than 50% of that is controlled by you or your allies. What does it mean to own cyberspace? If you want to be a Bitcoin superpower, you need to own the asset, own Bitcoin, but that's only half of it. Owning all of New York City and losing control of the sea lanes and the airspace above New York City is a Pyrrhic victory, right? You won't own it very long, and it'll get shredded. You have to control the network, the cyber network, the digital energy network that flows around the world. AI is the future. The computers, the AIs, they're smarter than us. They're going to think faster than us. At some point, they'll be thinking 1,000,000 times a second, talking to each other, right? And if you want to build the greatest economy in the world, your cars need to drive themselves. The robots need to think. The factories need to think. And your agent needs to be thinking 1,000,000 times a second about how to do something useful for you. Digital intelligence requires digital energy, which has to be secured by digital power in order to engage in digital commerce. When I say digital commerce, I don't just mean buying trinkets on Amazon. I mean moving all of the money and securing all the assets of the world. I mean, 950 trillion going to 4,000 trillion dollars of assets. And it couldn't be clearer where that's headed right now. The unit of digital energy is the Satoshi. The unit of digital power is the exahash, right? What are the benefits to America of the Bitcoin strategy? Embrace Bitcoin. We own the 21st century. All the money, all the capital of the world is moving out of the 20th century. Everything that made sense, every educated financier was educated in the 20th century. They were taught a bunch of bromides, a bunch of rules. All of those rules probably made sense in the 20th century. The way we fought World War II is not the way we fight World War III. Every military doctrine, every financial doctrine, it might have been right at one point. It's not right any longer. Trillions of dollars of capital is going to flow from those physical and financial assets into digital, into the Bitcoin network. Now, you might say, well, I'm making a strong assertion. Bitcoin is the digital capital network. I'm not just the one making that assertion. The president of the United States made that assertion last week, explained by David Sachs on Friday night. He said, Bitcoin is the only crypto asset that is truly decentralized. It is special. Maybe in the future, there might be some other digital capital. The US government doesn't recognize any other digital capital, nor do we. And that's because 99% of the power in the crypto ecosystem is in the Bitcoin network. If you want to own cyberspace and own the future, you need to own it. Embrace Bitcoin and strengthen the dollar. We have the chance to establish, own, and control the global digital capital network. That is Bitcoin. We can back the US dollar with Bitcoin reserves, the only monetary asset that is competitive to the dollar. If I need a liquid fungible asset to capitalize a company or an institution, it's not real estate, it's not natural gas, it's not art, it's not private and public equity portfolios, it's not even going to be an index of equity. The only asset that I can use other than Bitcoin is US treasuries everywhere in the world. If anybody ever decides to replace those, they'll replace them with Bitcoin. We should own both. Embrace Bitcoin, attract foreign capital. It's not just we're getting the 20th century money, we're getting the rest of the world's money. If I gave you money, if I took all your money, I dropped you in Africa and I said, you got to invest in a diversified portfolio, private and public equity and real estate or in Africa, or you can put your money into the digital capital network and move it anywhere else at the speed of light. And I gave you a choice to punch the orange button or leave it in Africa for 100 years. You would punch the orange button. Everybody else in the world's figuring out the same thing right now. That's why countries will make laws against it. That's why the Chinese have export controls on their capital. All of the capital will flow into the US. But if you can't physically come to the US, the next best thing is you flow into the digital capital network and you get all the protections of the US. And finally, you embrace Bitcoin, you empower Americans. It's American companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet. They're going to outlast, outperform, and outlive their competitors. So American institutions that are holding Bitcoin, they're going to enrich their shareholders. The beneficiaries are us. And the last point, with the appropriate digital assets framework, we can become the bankers to the world, right? When we export Bitcoin to the world, we're exporting our values: sovereignty, sound money, integrity, property rights. When we export digital currency, we're literally exporting our currency. If we create other digital securities or digital tokens, we'll be exporting our companies, our ideas, our securities, our financial products to the world. We can dominate this industry. So how should the US pursue a Bitcoin strategy? Well, Senator Lummis has given us a clear guideline with the Bitcoin Act in Nashville in July.
Okay, quickly here. I did my best not to stop, but I got to stop at one time here. So look at the title of this one. How should the United States pursue a Bitcoin strategy? Good info here, I'm sure. But when you're listening to this, replace this, United States, with how should I? How should we? How should Timbercrasher pursue a Bitcoin strategy? Listen to the words, but think about it from your own perspective here.
Strategy. Well, Senator Lummis has given us a clear guideline with the Bitcoin Act in Nashville in July. And what the Bitcoin Act said, it said, let's acquire 1 million Bitcoin over a 5-year period in a programmatic, disciplined fashion, transparent to all. And so let's consider the consequences of this strategy. Well, first of all, last week, the president signed the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Act or order. If we hold that 200,000 Bitcoin for the next 20 years, even though you see a flat line on the screen, the flat line is worth $3 trillion. So that's the value of doing nothing. Sometimes people think that you have to do something to make money. Sometimes the absence of doing awful and stupid things is making money. Doing stuff is highly overrated if the stuff is trading or selling your Bitcoin. The Lummis bill would acquire a million Bitcoin or 1.2 million Bitcoin. If you look at the consequences of that over the time frame, it's worth $16 trillion to the nation. If you get a bit more aggressive and we go to another million, $34 trillion to the nation. In this case, there's a bit of reflexivity. If the United States starts to more aggressively stockpile Bitcoin, it's going to accelerate the growth of the network. It's going to accelerate capital flowing in the network. It's going to increase and expand the overall digital capital network. If we move to a triple max strategy, you'll end up with 4 million Bitcoin. That's worth $73 trillion to America. And of course, President Trump has laid out a guideline. We should be the superpower. If you want a superpower strategy, here's a superpower strategy. Acquire Bitcoin consistently. By the way, over what time frame? Consistently daily between now and the 0.99. 0.99 is January of the year 2035, the point at which 99% of the Bitcoin supply has been mined. The asset becomes effectively capped for all practical purposes because the last 1% comes out over 100 years. 0.99 between now and then is that you've got 10 years for the digital gold rush. You should get your Bitcoin before there's no more Bitcoin for you. And you can see here, in this strategy, we acquire it consistently, and then we use surpluses from the US government to continue to save in Bitcoin. It's worth $106 trillion to the United States. And so what does that look like? Well, the Lummis plan, which is grand, is modest in some ways, and a modest strategic Bitcoin reserve plan neutralizes the national debt. Sometimes doing modest things are actually brilliant as long as you do the thing. It's like the people that bought just a little bit of Bitcoin in 2012. It was a modest investment. It made them billionaires. A modest thing 20 years in advance is a brilliant thing. If you're more aggressive, the triple max plan negates the national debt. The superpower plan creates a global superpower. We bought 78% of the United States for $40 million. $40 million purchased nearly 80% of this country. Think about it for a second. Bitcoin is the greatest opportunity of the 21st century, right? It's worth anywhere from 3 trillion to 106 trillion, depending upon how programmatic and aggressive we want to pursue this opportunity. These opportunities don't come along often. This is the once in a century opportunity. And as Donald Trump has said, never sell your Bitcoin. And I'll leave you with the final thought. What happens if we allow another nation to claim title to Bitcoin superpower? If we don't claim it, we give them control of the network. We give them all the wealth in the world. We risk being impoverished and imperiled by a hostile nation that controls all the world's digital energy. You could have clung to your glass beads when the world went to the gold standard. You could have clung to your steam engines when the world went to internal combustion. You know, you could have kept your wood-burning stoves when Rockefeller offered you petroleum. We could have dismissed nuclear power. We once had another project. We had a Manhattan project. It was a large investment in nuclear energy. Do you want to control the world's digital energy? Because the digital economy will run on digital energy. The choices are either prosperity or poverty in the 21st century. Bitcoin is manifest destiny for America. Thank you.
Like, the worst person to follow up is Michael Saylor in Bitcoin. But quickly, because we don't have a whole lot of time here, so I got to shoot through things here. So first of all, I want to say a big thank you to Craig. I see he had a fat zap of 2,100 sats over on the Zap stream, so thank you, Craig. We also had a 888 sat zap, anonymous, to Arnie's QR code during that video. So thank you for those two, Craig and anonymous. So next part here, I guess I'll briefly touch on a couple key things there that I took away anyways. First thing was that he called Bitcoin, what was it even? For the 21st century. That was the point of it. Wealth for the 21st century. He didn't say this is wealth for March 2025 or wealth for the 2020s. Wealth for the 21st century. So when we're thinking about all this kind of stuff, we have to take that kind of lens. Never just like next week, next month, next year, even next 4 years, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now. That's the kind of stuff that we need to be thinking about here as Bitcoiners. He also called it a moral capital, immoral capital. He said that nothing else will survive past 100 years. Everything else, buildings, other assets, companies, they last about 10 or 100 years. Bitcoin is immortal capital. That's when I say Bitcoin is the best battery. You take your time and your energy, whatever kind of value you go into the world every day, whatever value you give to the world, you get back. And you store that value in the best battery that has ever existed before, which is Bitcoin, because it has zero leaks in it. Zero leaks, zero property tax, zero fees, zero insurance, zero storage costs. You put a UTXO into a wallet today and you don't do anything at all. You check back in 100 years from now, you're going to have the exact same amount of sats. That's why Bitcoin's the best battery. That's why it's immortal capital. The next one was when we talked about how does the US approach this? How do you approach this? How do we approach this? So think about it, 10-year accumulation. He said at the end of 2035, that's when the digital gold rush ends, which is 10 years from now. So I saw a couple comments in the chat here about trying to get to X amount of Bitcoin in the next little while. Yes, you should have some urgency here, but it's also important to think out 10 years and not like 10 months or 10 weeks ahead here. Take a very long-term lens with all of this, including your accumulation. The next one he said, all you have to do is hold on. That's it. You literally have to do nothing. Again, send a UTXO to a wallet, leave it there for 100 years. Don't do anything. It's going to be there. So all you have to do is hold on to it, protect it, which is going to be what we're talking about here next. But the third one there, just like the US is doing right now, they're doing all this in a budget neutral fashion, which means that the taxpayers aren't going to pay for it. If you think about that in terms of your perspective and your family's perspective, that means you don't have to go out and make any more money. You could do the exact same thing. You could do a budget neutral accumulation of Bitcoin, starting with looking around your house this weekend. Walk around your house, see what you can sell, see what you haven't used in the last 1 or 2 years, and just sell that. Get some cash, trade it for Bitcoin. That's a solid strategy. And finally here, the last thing I wanted to talk about was 21 years. He said that the bear case for Bitcoin in 21 years from now will be $3 million per Bitcoin, right? So how old are you going to be in 21 years? I'm going to be in my 50s. Would I be happy with $3 million bear case? Yes. Would I know what to do with it? No. I think that there's the bear case, there's the conservative case, there's the bull case. I personally think this is going to be much higher than the bull case, just of how things work. But even with that, even with 3 million, like, what are you going to do with that? You have to start thinking about this. And I was watching some comments here. I found this one quite interesting from Folsom Hoddle here, which was, honestly, I don't want to get as wealthy as Saylor says we're going to get. And it's a legit thing. That's something I talk about on the channel all the time. It's like, yes, it sounds like a great idea, but we have to actually start preparing for that day today, mentally and physically, with our Bitcoin security, because it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have if you have shitty security on it. If the foundation sucks, it's going to get wrecked. Regardless of how much Bitcoin you store and stack on top of that, if you aren't doing things properly today, it's going to be completely irrelevant. So the last 10 minutes here, I'm going to spend talking about the best way to protect your Bitcoin. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was talking to them, and I was telling them about Superback and the security and inheritance protocol that we have and that we've been offering to people. And I said, like, this is the best thing that exists in Bitcoin. And they're like, well, I love how confident you are in that. And I said, well, you know what? Like, I've thought about this stuff for so long. For so long, I'd lay in bed and think of, like, how can I, these are my, like, risks. These are my threats. How can I make sure that I have a counter to that? What can I do? How can I do this better? And I was trying to get super creative with it all. But every road I went down, it always had a dead end where there was one vector there that I couldn't really counter, until I realized I was just kind of missing the whole point of it, right? So the problem here that Superbacked and the service that we provide, the problem that we solve is the recovery phrase. That's the problem with everybody's security setup within Bitcoin, is your recovery phrase, right? Because most people have one of these. I'm sure that 90% of people watching the show today have a cold card or a jade or a passport, a Trezor, a ledger, whatever that is. And that's great. That's what you want. But with that comes 12 words. And the 12 words is what Superback solves here. So you could have the best hardware wallet in the world by 100 times. But if you're storing your backup phrase on paper or steel in your house and somebody comes across those 12 words, it doesn't matter what this thing does. Because if somebody wants to take your Bitcoin from this, they need a PIN code. Very secure. They could put in 10 pins. They were wrong and it bricks itself. It self-destructs. But then you have 12 words or 24 words laying around on paper or steel, regardless of how well you hit it. The point is if somebody comes across those 12 or 24 words, that is the problem. That's your vulnerability there. And people have come up with different ways to store it. They fragment it, they disperse it, they leave it somewhere else. And that's kind of what I did originally for myself, is I was like, just in case, there's a fire in my house or something, I don't want to have everything in this house. So what I did was I duplicated my private key, my 12 words. I gave it to a friend or a family member. And then I was sitting there one night or laying in bed one night, and I thought, like, if something happens to their house, or not their house, but if somebody breaks into their house or somebody comes across my 12 words in their house, I'm done. My Bitcoin's gone without me even knowing it or having any ability to protect that Bitcoin. So that's a vulnerability there. Whenever you're putting your 12 words in your house or somebody else's house as a duplication of that, those are both vulnerabilities there. It's exposed in plain text. That's the whole problem here. And that's what Superback and the service that we have solves. So that's kind of like the big picture, like the problem. I'll talk about the solution though, in terms of like what we offer and how it solves that problem. So let me bring this up because we have a very well written, description of it. So the inheritance thing that we have is called 21 Sats Inheritance, which uses Superback. So it's a laptop-based offline system that securely stores critical data, recovery words, passphrase, pins, passcodes, financial account details, anything else that's valuable to you. This is not specific to Bitcoin. Replacing traditional paper and steel backups. It uses Superback software and an air-gapped laptop, plus the inheritance protocol developed by us. So how it works, basically it encrypts the sensitive information that would otherwise exist in plain text. So instead of that 12 or 24 words on paper or steel, it's now encrypted. It generates encrypted QR codes requiring password authentication to access it. So essentially what you're doing here in a fully air-gapped, not connected to the internet, hard drive ripped out of it, laptop, you're putting in your 12 or 24 words plus any other important information that you want to secure. So you put that into a little text box and you lock it up. And then in order to unlock that or reveal the secret within that text box, you scan a QR code and put in your password. That's how it unlocks it. That's the encryption part of that. So it integrates with the inheritance protocol that can be stored by yourself or at a trusted location in a 21 Sats bank vault. No trust required. So it's transparent, the Superback software itself is transparent and verifiable code available on GitHub for recovery. In case you were to ever lose your laptop, your USB, however you're storing your copy of it, it's available and verifiable on GitHub, which is a very, very important part of this. Fully non-KYC service. No one except you ever has knowledge of your digital asset holdings. Also an important part. So when you think about competitors to this solution, so collaborative custody, you think of Unchained, you think of Casa, you think of a few other ones. They hold the key to that Bitcoin. They know how much Bitcoin you have. And whenever you're talking about Bitcoin security, never think in terms of like, would this happen? Because the chances of Unchained or Casa rugging you, I would say are very, very, very small. Would they do it? Probably not. But could they? Could something happen where the government comes and says, we want all access to your clients because you hold a key to them. We know you have their information. That's a vulnerability. So we can do this fully non-KYC. We don't need to know your last name. We don't need to know your email, your phone number, your address, and most importantly, how much Bitcoin you have. The core software Superback was developed by a privacy security expert and verified by the inventor of the first hardware wallet. So this code for Superback is transparent, verifiable, and has been reviewed by some of the best minds in Bitcoin, including the person who invented the hardware wallet, the Trezor. So you can find, I'll put this in the chat here for everybody if you want to go check it out. Here's the Superback website. I just put in the chat there for you. It's just superback.com. And in terms of the pricing, so we only have one package. There's no different tiers within our security inheritance protocol. Everybody gets the same treatment. Very important Bitcoiners treatment, which is $500 per year. That's one option. And we also offer a lifetime membership, which is $2,100. Most people who have signed up so far have gone the lifetime route. It makes the most sense because a few different reasons. The first thing I would say is that every year, part of this includes what I'm about to talk about here. It includes a health check. So twice per year, Craig and I will meet with you, with your family, get everybody trained, get everybody educated, familiar, trusting. And so it's a lifetime. This is something that you want for after you're gone. If something were to unexpectedly happen to you, that's the whole point of this service here. Yes, it's great for the security, but the inheritance is kind of the whole magic within this. So it's $500 a year. That's one option, or you can do a lifetime membership, most popular, $2,100. You can also pay that over 3 years for $800 for a total of $2,400. And that's probably going to increase. I'm going to be completely honest with you. That's probably going to increase here in the next little while. We started with these prices just to get some interest, to get some people working with some people here, get some testimonials, get some reviews on it. But this service, I would say just having access to Craig himself is worth more than that price tag on it. So if you compare it to other competitors who offer something like this, that's criminal how low that is. So it's not going to be like that forever. We're just kind of getting off the ground. We are a newer company, so we need to, build a reputation here. And then I'm guessing that'll go up quite a bit. But that's what it is today. So all the payment methods include the exact same VIB, very important Bitcoiner package, which is a program overview and personal assessment. So we look at kind of where you are right now and make it better right off the bat. We also give custom equipment recommendations. So what kind of hardware you're going to need to go ahead with this. A full list of everything that you need to order, which is about less than $500. So that's kind of the initial investment that you have to make for this setup, plus the service that we provide. But once that's done, it's done. So we tell you everything that you need to do within the setup of it. The installation setup, we walk through basically step by step with you, not in person, not in the same room as you. You have full privacy. It's all non-KYC. We have no idea what you're putting in your box, but we walk you through it through a call like this. So a full installation and a tutorial. Personalized inheritance protocol and the secret management plan. So that's, again, kind of the magic of why this thing is so powerful is because the inheritance protocol that plugs into this thing. Plus the secret management plan. So you put these 12 words, your recovery phrase, any other important digital information, you put it into this text box, but we advise you like where to leave the QR codes, who you should trust with, how to manage it all, how you can incorporate that into your inheritance plan and make it crystal clear for your family. Again, if something were to happen to you, they need to know exactly what to do, not just have like this, decent understanding of it or decent idea or a treasure map or anything. It has to be crystal clear of where everything is. Plus verification biannual health check. So again, we do twice a year. We meet with you, your family, whoever wants to be involved in the process, make sure that you can recover it. See if there's any ways we can make your security setup even better. Because again, we start with where you are. There's no requirements that you need to have a multi-sig or this device or this in place. We start with where you are, make it better. And then each year, twice a year, we find ways to improve that. Maybe we move it into a multi-sig eventually, if it makes sense. Recovery support, big one, obviously. If something were to happen to you, we are the people that your family reaches out to and says, here's the inheritance plan. Help us through this, please. Help us restore this Bitcoin. Without having to go through all the KYC stuff, without having to go through the courts, the probate, all the BS, we'll help you do it. And between now and then, that's when we put steps in place like a trust, like a will, to make sure that you avoid all that stuff that you don't want to have to deal with, or your family doesn't have to want to deal with after you're gone. And of course, email and live chat support. So basically, we do all the communications through the Signal app. We set up a group chat for the initial call. Plus, that's where all the communication happens. So we won't be available 24/7, but 365 days a year, one of us will be available for anything that you need. So again, having a guy like Craig on your team is worth this price tag 10x probably, just for that, in my opinion. Knowing him, having spent some time with him, you cannot put a price on that sort of information. And I haven't said this before to him or to anybody before, but I think he is probably one of the top, I want to say 1,000, but it might even be 100 minds in Bitcoin in the world. Privacy, security, everything that you need to know. And you're going to have this guy on your team. That to me is worth, again, 10x the admission just for that alone. Never mind the encryption, never mind the inheritance, any of that. Having a guy like Craig on your team is worth this 10x. And I was thinking about it last night. I'm like, I was thinking in my head, $2,100, how it seems like a lot to a lot of people. And I get that. I would be in the exact same position. But when I think about similar things and what else I've paid $2,100 for, and other professionals, other advisors, you could go into an accounting firm on your block in your city, and you could say, here's my tax return. I want you to do my corporate tax return for the year. So basically, you're going to look at everything that I've already done this year and put it into a fancy document and send that into the government. And we're going to charge you $4,000 for this year. So yes, $2,100 seems like it's hard to swallow. But when you compare that to what we're offering here, it's not even close. So that I just wanted to throw that in there because that's something I was thinking about. I'm like, what do other advisors charge? What do other professionals charge in the fiat world to look at things that you've already done? Never mind protect anything you have, but just basically review it and send it into the government. They're charging you $4,000 for that for 1 year. So my biggest fear within this is people are going to look at the $2,100 and say, how valuable are these guys really? That's my biggest concern with this, because people see value based on the price. So again, we're probably going to have to boost this up in the future here, but we're just kind of getting started here. We're just getting off the ground. So that's kind of where we are right now. So that's everything that's included in there. The solution supports unlimited wallets and multi-sig wallets. It supports Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, including stablecoins. It can also store and encrypt other digital assets such as financial accounts, 2FA codes, PIN codes, and other important passwords. We encourage family members to be involved with the review to get them comfortable and confident with the process. It's a big one. I don't know how many other advisory or security companies have that. Twice a year, check in with you and your family, make sure everybody's on the same page. That's what you want. You want it to be clear. They don't need to know how much Bitcoin you have or anything like that. But if something were to happen to you unexpectedly, it has to be crystal clear, making sure that they can restore that Bitcoin. And what makes our service truly unique is the focus on your privacy. That's the real differentiator here. Full privacy, fully non-KYC. Again, we don't need to know your last name. We don't need to know your phone number, address, email, how much Bitcoin you have, nothing. We don't hold a key to this. It's all on you. We just kind of help you through it all. We guide you. And the only drawback here is that it takes a little bit more work, more responsibility. Again, the other options are very convenient, very easy, but there's trade-offs. Everything has trade-offs here. So if you are somebody who doesn't want to go through this process, then yeah, this might not make sense for you. It's more work, fully non-KYC. We don't hold a key. We don't know how much Bitcoin you have. You don't have to trust us with anything here. That's the beauty of it. But it's not for everybody, because some people aren't going to want to go through take the time to do this. So that's kind of the background on it. And I wanted to get through a couple different questions that people have been asking about it, a couple key ones. And I'm sorry I've kind of been neglecting the chat here. I just really wanted to get through that. Okay. So the one of the questions that people have been asking is like, what's the threshold? What's the amount of Bitcoin I need to have in order to be like to make an investment into this? And I don't think that there's a threshold in terms of how much Bitcoin you need to have. I think it's more important. The more important question is like, could you be buying more Bitcoin instead? Like if you have like 1 million sats or 2 million sats, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to be doing this right now. I would rather see you buy Bitcoin instead right now and come back to us in like a year or two when you have more Bitcoin. That's kind of what I would say there. But it's not like you need a full Bitcoin, because as we just watched Saylor talk about there, like this thing is going to be more valuable than we can even imagine, even fathom in our heads right now. So you're preparing for that day. That's the steps we're taking between now and then. You're preparing for that. And again, Craig and I, there's only 2 of us right now. We probably will be expanding in terms of like working with more people. But there's only 2 of us right now. So our time is limited. So the longer you wait, the longer you procrastinate, it's just going to stretch on. And at that point, who knows? Maybe this service now costs 10x what it did today. So within reason, like if you're still trying to get as much Bitcoin as you can right now, this probably doesn't make sense for you. If you're kind of like satisfied and comfortable with the amount of Bitcoin that you have and you want to protect that, that's kind of where I would lean towards this kind of a plan right now. Putting that money into this instead of buying more Bitcoin. So there's no number, just kind of like where you're at right now in terms of your accumulation. Another question is, which wallet do I use? So it doesn't matter. We basically start with wherever you are. You could have all your Bitcoin on a ledger right now, and we would just start with that. And we'd find a way to make that better on day one. And we would encrypt your 12 or 24 words with this service, set up the inheritance. And then again, during our biannual checkups, that's when we would say, okay, maybe we should consider moving this to a cold card. What does that look like? The beauty of Superback is it's very, very flexible, and it can evolve as your security needs evolve as well. So we basically start with you are. It doesn't matter. Start with where you are. It doesn't matter where you are. That's what you have. That's where you're starting with. And then we'll just get better slowly over time with it. Who holds the keys? You. We hold nothing. We know nothing. That's the beauty of this plan, this protocol. We don't hold a key. We don't know how much Bitcoin you have. We don't know where you live, anything like that. You could do this whole thing without us even knowing your first name, which is crazy. But that's what our focus is on here. We very much value your privacy, and we don't think it's a necessary step in this whole thing. And it takes a lot of liability off of us too, because if we don't have that information, if somebody comes to us, what are we going to give them? So who holds the keys? You hold all the keys. You manage that. That's what you put in the documents. You have a very clear map and a plan of who's holding these QR codes and where they are, and you hold all of them. That's the whole thing here. And I think that this is one of the things that gets most people's interest here is like, this is the only thing that I'm aware of that allows you to maintain full ownership of your Bitcoin keys, not having to trust anybody and not telling anybody how much Bitcoin you have. You could have zero trace of Bitcoin in your house using this protocol. It's the only thing that, I shouldn't say that. There's other ways to do it, but there's trade-offs there. Again, somebody else is holding a key. You might not have any Bitcoin keys in your house, but that means that somebody else is holding the key for you. In this case, they're holding a QR code, which is encrypted. They don't know it has anything to do with Bitcoin. They don't know what's behind that QR code. So you could leave these with people that you don't even trust. They can't do anything with it. So that's the whole thing here, is you can have zero trace of Bitcoin in your house, on your person, while still maintaining full ownership and trusting nobody. There's nothing better than that in Bitcoin. That's the end goal. That's what this is. This is the end goal of your Bitcoin security. So it's not something that happens in a week. Even the people we've been working with for a while, it takes a long time. But the first step is just committing to it, starting. And the last question here, and a very important one, I would say, is that what if Craig and I disappear and you go through the process of paying for a lifetime membership? Very valid question. And every startup on the planet in existence has gone through the same thing, where they offer a lifetime membership, and you never know if the company's going to be around in 20 years or 10 years or even 2 years. So there's a couple different answers that I would have for that, but the main thing is that the Superback software itself, you have the copy of it, you have the file, what am I looking for here? You have the software, you have the file on your computer. I'm just drawing a blank right now. But the point is that even if Craig or I did disappear, even if we went rogue, and again, we don't have any of your information, we don't have a key to your Bitcoin, which is an important part of that. But even if we disappeared, Superback itself is available on GitHub. It's available on the archived internet, I believe, where you can restore it. You have a copy. We both have a copy, but in this case, we're gone. So you have a copy. But the other thing too here is that Superback is, as of now, going to be rolled out commercially. So there's law firms, there's notaries, there's banks who are in the process of setting this up right now. So even if we disappeared, you could go in 5 years from now to one of these, they're called Superback operators, and you could essentially get them to restore your information there on your behalf. Again, it's going to cost more, probably be 20x of what we charge. Plus it's going to be fully KYC because it's a bank, right? So that's kind of like the last worst case scenario here. If we were to disappear in a couple of years, you would still have your file. You'd have a copy of it, and you could take that to one of these commercial operators, or again, just get it off GitHub or archived internet, whatever that's called. And of course, we have no intentions of doing that. We're here for the very long term. It also helps that I have a public YouTube channel. So the risk here isn't really worth the reward for me, obviously. And the final thing that I would say to that is that if we were ever to like shut down, if me and Craig got in a disagreement or something, we're going to give back your payment, full refund. Even if you go through 6 months of this and you're not satisfied with what we're doing, we'll give you a full refund on it. Like, we're not in the business here, clearly, of ripping people off. We would rather have you buy Bitcoin. Probably our biggest drawback is neither of us are big salespeople. We don't put any sort of pressure on anybody. People come to us and we help them. So that's the questions. That's the overview of it. I'll probably clip this just so it's kind of in a different spot here, but I'll buzz through a couple real quick questions. I got to get going here. But I'm going to see if there's anything that I missed that I could answer here. Best Jor quote ever. Randy says, Jor, I have all of our Bitcoin equivalents in Bitcoin. What will I need to purchase? Wallets, encryption of these items? Well, I think I just answered the majority of that for you, hopefully. Need Superback right now. I have crypto tag, but that's it. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing here. That's the other part I would say in terms of like a threshold is like, once people understand how good this is, I know how busy that we're going to be. For real. It just makes so much sense. So don't like wait to hit a certain threshold in Bitcoin to reach out to us. Like, just start the process today. What form of encryption is Superback using? That's not an answer that I have. That's a Craig question. But I'm sure if you went to superback.com, you could probably find the info there, or on GitHub. It should have that information there. I don't know myself. And this is exactly true. My financial advisor is 1% of the portfolio and $2,000 per year fee. But yeah. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there because I do got to get going here. But the last thing I would say is that if you are interested, I see that majority of people have been kind of watching the number of people in here right now. And it seems like there wasn't a whole lot of people leave, which means that there's probably a little bit of interest here. So if you're serious about this, the first thing I would say is just shoot me an email. That's step one. Just say, I'm interested. Can you give me some more info? If you have any questions, you can just ask me here. But we're also going to be doing like another private show with this, not a webinar where people have to pay for it, but just like for people who are serious about this, instead of just me talking to like the void here. If you're serious about our security inheritance protocol, we're going to do like an invite only kind of webinar type deal. Craig, he's a security privacy guy. He's never going to be on YouTube, but we've done a couple of these so far, and we'll do another one. So if you're interested, you can kind of just show up and ask specific questions. We'll get Craig to fill in any gaps that I may have missed here, but just shoot me an email, whether you have questions, whether you want to join the, I don't want to call it a private show. I guess it is kind of a private show, but the secondary session that we do here, or if you just want to take the leap and say, let's set up a call. I understand it conceptually. Let's move forward with it. So one of those three things, shoot me an email, wherever this is, bitcoincitadel.net, jor@bitcoincitadel.net. And yeah, that's it. So Bangrang says Superback is like encrypted text file with password split into 3 QR codes. It's a great idea. It's actually like you could do as many QR codes as you want to. So I'll just, maybe this is the last thing we'll discuss here, but let's say that you had, let's say you have this. You have one cold card, single signature wallet. That's where we're starting here, right? So you have the option here of, instead of putting your recovery phrase on paper or steel, we're encrypting that. So we put those 12 words into the text box. We put your PIN code, we put your passphrase, any of the metadata that's required to back it up properly. We put all that in there. That's part of the initial setup. So then from there, you have QR codes. You could do 1, you could do 3, you could do 5, you could do 10, and you could do one of 1. So just in order to unlock your text box, you just need one of those QR codes, combine that with your password, unlocked. You could do a multi-sig on top of a single sig. So instead of only needing 1, maybe you need 3 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 combined. Scan, 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 password, unlocked. So based on your comfort level, based on your risks, threats in your life, that's kind of how we decide what this looks like, big picture. So it could be 3, it could be 10, it could be 1 of 1, it could be 2 of 3. It's very flexible. And so the nice thing about this is you just have a password. That's the only thing that you need to remember here. You could send these QR codes to whoever you want to, wherever you want to, different parts of the world, your friend, your enemy. It's just a QR code. To restore it, you got to go get those QR codes, scan it, put in your password, and your password is what you back up. That's the thing that you have to keep here. And that's the thing that we advise people to put on Steal, because that's the thing that you need to have here. And you might say, well, Jor, that's in plain text, so that's kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. Yes, but somebody comes across one password in your house, could be for anything. Could be for your email, could be for your hydro, could be for anything. It's just one word. But if somebody came across 12 or 24 words in your house, that's Bitcoin. So that's the beauty of it, is that you take that password, it's one word, or you can, I think you can do up to 4. But either way, it's not 12, it's not 24. People would have no idea what it's for. That's what you put in Steal. That's what you put into your inheritance protocol. And that's how your Bitcoin lives on longer than you. So hope that makes sense. Again, we're not salespeople. There's zero pressure if you want to use this service. At this rate, just shoot me an email there. So I see a couple emails have already rolled in here. So that's good. So I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But for now, I hope you're having a great hump day. Thank you for a couple zaps here, whoever sent that in. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. We'll be back at the normal time tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time. So we'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.